is I'm just going to go through everything on PowerPoint, and then we'll have an opportunity to have questions at the end, okay? Right, so today's session is called Growing Up is Never Easy. So we've been over the housekeeping and the protocols, and again, we try to make this a safe space, but if, as we say in any of the sessions, if anything is triggering or you have concerns or uncomfortable, you feel free to leave the session at any time. And again, just let us know that you're okay and safe on that side. So the first part of it is just asking about how people are feeling. So I'm going to launch a poll, and again, it is anonymous, and just ask people how they're feeling today. And again, given the time of day as well, it's expected straight away we can see that a lot of people are tired. So we have about 75% at the moment are tired, and the other 25% are stressed. So being tired is understandable. Give this opportunity just for you to relax, recharge. This is quite informal. And being stressed, when we're stressed, our mind tends to be working at 100 miles an hour. So we're not really thinking in a way that we could be in a more constructive way. So the idea is just tell yourself to stop, okay? Take a break, take a step back. Again, use this time just to relax. And then think about what is actually stressing you out, and break it down, okay? So the idea is, what are the things that you can manage and deal with? What are the things that you can't manage? So do you need help and support in that? And what are the things that are out of your control? And the fact is that if they're out of your control, there's not a lot you can do about that. So it's just about accepting that and acknowledging that, and then working around there. And then once you've done that, you can start thinking about, right, well, how am I going to approach this in a different way? And that's here. Really, once you find yourself really stressed, tell yourself to stop, okay? Have a break, relax, and then come at it at a different way. As it says there, self-care is a vital part of personal growth. So the idea is that if you can look after yourself, your emotional, mental, and physical health, then that can help us deal with our daily conflicts in life. And it builds our self-confidence and resilience to support others. And that's includes your young people as well, okay? I'm just going to end the poll there. Put that to bed, as it were. And again, you can go on our website, and we do have some mindful videos that you can have a look at. So, the SCCR, the Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution, is a Cyrenians initiative. Why do we do what we do? So the reality is that last year in Scotland, over 5,000 young people aged 16 to 24 became homeless because the relationship within their families broke down. That's equivalent to the population of 5 high schools or a small village in Scotland. And you can see the impact there on young people. Arguments can make me feel very isolated from the family, and I feel suicidal at times. Self-harming is frequent. So again, the focus is on young people in terms of that and the impact of that. And a lot of the time, young people don't express feelings in a way that we're able to support them effectively without having that relationship and that communication. So it's really important. But it's not to take away the fact is there is an impact on the main caregiver, the parent or the carer. And again, it can be just as significant in relation to how people feel in terms of their emotional, mental, and physical health. So I think the key message here is about understanding the relationship better, and communicating better. We're not good communicators, but we can all reduce that figure through our family and mediation service. We've identified that by just communicating differently, we can actually reduce that statistic, okay? Because that statistic is the ones we know about. We know that number is a lot higher. We do session feedback for all our sessions. And again, we do it on a Menti platform for those people who have done it before. It's easy. You just go onto menti.com, you put the code in, and you answer the questions. It's quick and it's anonymous. It takes about a minute. Okay, and I'll at the end of the session, there'll be time to go into that as well. But if you have a pen, just take note of the code, as it'll be open most of the night. Okay, so as I said before, this session is called Growing Up is Never Easy, and it's part of our conflict resolution series of online short sessions, okay? And it is a very short session. So what we hope to do is explore the developmental stages of young people, reflect and consider our role or your role in managing these steps, and respond and support young people with a better understanding of their developmental needs, okay? So while this is quite a complex subject, we've simplified it to a point where people can understand it and take away what they've learnt, think about it, and apply it in the context of their own family or their own conflict scenario. Remember, I'm not the expert of your conflict. You are the experts of your own conflict. There is no silver bullet or magic wand that will resolve a conflict. So when we talk about conflict, it's about how you respond to that, okay? So if you want to escalate it, just jump in. If you want to de-escalate it, then you need to take a step back and think about it differently, okay? So all the training is about changing a mindset, all right? So the idea is that you go away and you think about what you've heard and what you've learned. There are no right or wrong answers to any of the questions or activities we do. And it's about trying to change your perception by changing how we perceive things, okay? All right, so our perspective has to change. And again, it is only a short session, so we touch on these things. Okay, so growing up, all right, this is not alien to us. We've all done it. And as it says there, we are each and all a product of nature and nurture, and we're capable of learning and developing throughout our lifetimes. So for all mammals, including us, okay, humans, during development, our infancy, our early childhood, our adolescence and late adolescence, biology often dictates how our actions and reactions for us to learn, okay, and survive. Be socialized and self-sufficient in adulthood. Okay, so that's how we grow up, right? And that biology within us is developmental, okay? The biology is influenced by experiential learning. As we grow, we thrive and we can survive. And that experiential learning, however, can be positive or negative, both impacting on our growth and development. All right, so that's a key thing here, that experiential learning, that path we go down. Now, my previous employment was with offenders and ex-offenders. And my work with young offenders, this was quite evident in terms of the experiences they had meant the life skills that they gained were counterproductive. Okay. And they made bad decisions and bad choices. So the majority, the vast majority are there because they are victims of circumstance, the path they took and the choices they made, because it was limited. So I've identified their stages in adolescence. So you have early is 11 to 14, it would suggest, middle 15 to 17, and late 18 to 21. And we can explore that in the next sort of slide, as it were. So I'm going to talk about the stages to adulthood. And this was a chart that was presented to me many moons ago at a conference and a CEO of a drugs agency. But I was sitting in the audience as a worker, but as a parent. And as a parent, I thought that makes so much sense to me. I understand that. It's been put across quite simple for me to understand. Therefore, I can engage with it. So hopefully, and I've used it ever since, to be honest with you. Okay, so hopefully it will make sense to you and you'll gain from this. So we're going to start off with growing up can be tough, all right? And as I said before, we've all done it. We've all been through this process. And for some of us, it's been a relatively good and productive experience. For others, it can have been a difficult and quite a negative experience. And again, when I do this activity about remembering the behaviours when you were younger, it can be quite a lively activity when I do it in person. And people reminisce, and you hear a lot of laughter and as they remember their younger days. But I was brought down to earth by a participant in one session saying that not every young person had the same experience. And not every young person wants to remember that and be reminded of that. So again, it's just being aware of that and acknowledging that as well. But here we have, and again, in simple terms, we have a timeline, our developmental stages. So I've put it here from 0 to 21. And we'll just go through them. So we have influences in our life and we have stages in our life. Okay, these developmental stages. But what we know now from research, brain research in particular, that our brain develops within the womb. So our brain develops about 50%. So we're talking about our brain stem and our limbic system, that emotional stuff. And then when we come out into the world, our brain continues to develop through our experiential learning. Okay? And that development continues to the mid-20s. And the last part of the brain to develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is basically in charge of all executive functions, all the emotional communication, the emotional intelligence. So once we understand that, we can look at it slightly differently, or we could look at our young people in slightly different ways in terms of development. Because their development, their brain development develops through experiential learning. So every experience until that brain has fully developed is learning for that young person and development for the brain. So what we need to remember is trying to give our young people positive, healthy messages and experiences. And again, It's easy to say, but can be difficult to do. But the reality is that if we can do that, then arguably that young person's brain will develop in a positive and healthy way. So we come into the world and we know nothing. The world is alien to us. And certainly as a baby, this is our first time. The key influencer are those main caregivers that are carrying out the parental role. Okay, so they're the key influencers. And we would regard this as a developmental stage. Okay, so as babies and toddlers, we are absorbing everything in the world. And I mean everything. Harvard University has updated their research in brain development. And the reality is, for the first 3 years of a child's brain, they are making 1 million connections per second, per day, for the first 3 years of their life. Now, let you think about that. 1 million per second every day for the first 3 years of their life. So the brain activity is absolutely phenomenal, something we can't comprehend. So everything they're taking in, and they're making these neural connections. And I'm a grandparent of my kids are like 3 and 5 years old. But when they were babies, I just looked at them in a completely different way to how I used to view my children. And I understand now why they have this sort of goldfish brain, they're distracted by everything on that side. And that's because of just sponges on there. So from 0 to 3. And then from 3 to 5, they go through a pruning stage. So they start to hardwire these connections, these neural connections. So again, what we understand is that this is a sort of learning stage. So they start to apply things that they're hardwiring, so what they're learning. And again, there'll be other role models coming into their life. So they'll go to nursery and they'll go to primary school, and they'll learn of other people. And again, I can see that in my grandkids. They come back and they talk about, the teacher, Mrs. Smith, and their friends, their new friends. And all these people are influencing them and role modeling them. And at this stage, they may come back with uncharacteristic behaviour. So they may come out with their first swear word and shout it all over the house, but not know exactly what it means. Okay? So this is that learning phase that they're going through. And it's a really good stage because they're applying that learning. So how do we nurture that? How do we nurture that learning? How do we capitalise on that? Then we talk about the stages going up to the teenage years. So the preteens in that respect. And this stage we would regard as an experimental stage. So they're now going through a change process. And what they find is that peers become very important. So they have to go out and make friends. And again, this would be identified as a primal instinct. So back in the day when we used to live in tribes, young people have to leave the tribes to create new tribes to survive, okay? So there's something innate in us that we need to go out and establish it. And we are social beings. And the experimental phase or stage is about them seeing themselves as young adults, okay? They're starting to see themselves as young adults. And they're looking at adults and seeing what behaviours and activities that adults are doing. And they're trying them out, okay? So that experimental phase, have you tried this? Or have you tried that? And they're trying and they're experimenting with them. And they see adults as not conforming to anything. So again, this becomes really difficult when parents and carers are trying to connect with young people, and they're still in that attachment role, that control role, and you get some conflict there. Okay, young people are looking for freedom to do what they feel they like. Okay, as a young adult, and the parents are trying to keep them safe and secure. So that's being a little bit restrictive on them. And it's very much a judgment call when it comes to this experimental phase for parents and carers. But they move on and they've gone from this experimental phase to this macho phase. Okay, so their friends become their social groups, their tribe, as it were. But their social groups are really important to them. Okay. As you can see, these are the key influencers now. The macho phase, so it's gone from have you tried this, have you tried that, to I did this last night and I did that. So they're trying to establish their status within their social group. And again, some uncharacteristic behaviors might come out of this. So they may do something that's like you don't understand. They're quite intelligent, you have an intelligent conversation with them, and then suddenly they do something that's, what did you do that for? And they'll shrug their shoulders because they don't really know. It was something within them that they felt that they had to reaffirm their status within their social group. So they did something that they thought that might work. And a lot of time it just backfires. Now, I'm not saying all young people do this, but certainly it's a trait in this developmental stage. And then what happens is we become 18. So what's significant about the age 18 in society? The reality is that society identifies the age 18 as an adult stage. Okay? No reason. All right. We know that developmentally that doesn't make sense. Okay? Because we develop at different stages. So if young people are restricted in going through their experimental stages, developmental stages, then at 18, they may turn around and say, well, you can't tell me what to do. I can do what I like. I'm an adult. And suddenly they revert back to this sort of teenage behavior, all right, because they haven't explored that. Now, the problem is that while they're teenagers, society may see them as, well, they're teenagers, that's what they do, okay? But as an adult, is a different perception. So, and again, through my experience, they do something, they get caught, they go to court, they get a criminal record. Society will say, no, you should have known, you're an adult, go to jail. And again, I've experienced it, young offenders that are in jail because they didn't know any better. They didn't make the right choices. They didn't have the skills to make the right choices or the information to make the right choices or the role models to help them make the right choices. So it's very important then we recognize that. But I want to concentrate on this stage. So this is the tough stage, the growing up stage. So we've identified what's happening externally. So they're trying to make friends, they're trying to create social groups, they're trying to be part of that social group. But what's happening inside them? What's happening internally? We know now that we're going through puberty, okay? Our hormones are developing, emotions are developing and becoming overwhelming. And they're struggling that. Every young person struggles through this period internally, okay? As we grow up. So the reality is breaking it down into two simple stages. So young people are looking for independence. Now, I've sort of identified that this is for a parent or a parent. This can be, or even a professional, to be honest with you. This could be developed through task management. So what you're trying to do is, how do we get them to be responsible and accountable? Young people will say, yeah, I can do that, but don't blame me if it goes wrong. So they're okay to take responsibility, but then not so keen to take the accountability if things go wrong. So what we do is we try to manage that effectively. And we develop those skills. So we might provide them with a task, an achievable task, but something that might challenge them. And that could be started, quite early on in life, as it were. A simple task. The young person does the task, um, and they become confident and competent in that task. As the main caregiver or a parent, you become confident in sending that child on that task. You've now built in confidence and competence, which means that that child can undertake any similar types of tasks, and they're confident to do that. So you've now built in responsibility and accountability. Now, again, the simple example I give, all right, my hypothetical children, okay, I have Rosie and Ben, all right. Rosie's the young one and Ben's the older one. So Rosie may be 12 and Ben may be 14. And I come and I say, right, who wants to go down the shops and get me a paper? So Rosie jumps up and says, I'll do it. So I give them some money. Here's £10. Go and get me a paper. So Rosie nips down to the shops, gets me a paper, and comes back. There's your paper. I say, where's my change? Change? I've got £8.50 worth of sweets in my pocket. At this opportunity, we should be stepping back and saying, this might be a child development opportunity, rather than shout at them and say, you should have got me change. You have to acknowledge the fact that you didn't actually communicate the right instructions. All right. So you haven't put the child off. So the next time you say to them, right, you okay to get me a paper? Yeah, I'll go down and get a paper. Right, here's the money, here's £10. Get paper. Here's something for yourself, and then bring me back the change. So they go down, get the paper, bring back the change, and they've got something for themselves. This goes on. The child becomes very confident and competent in that task. You're confident sending them on that task. They have now identified or created a situation where they become responsible and accountable for that task. That is looking at building maturity, confidence, and competence. Now, the reality going back to that is the fact that it was the younger child that showed that they wanted that responsibility. So what's happening there is that they are now moving out from the attachment phase into the detachment phase of their life, that young adult process. The other thing is about individuality. So that's more sensitive. We have to be more sensitive to that. So that's about questioning, who am I on this planet? And again, it's something where it deals with the internal struggle of hormones and developmental stuff. And it's personal, very personal to the young person. So how do we support that? And there's no right answer to this, okay? This is about understanding them better. So it may be a case that old Ben comes in one day and he's got like a green Mohican and a bone through his nose. And you sort of take a step back and you go, is that a good look? And he goes, well, I don't want to look like you. I'm my own person, okay? I'm trying to stamp my own identity. So you work with that and you explore that with them. I think my son, he went through lots of different um, images, all right, of, I think the worst one he did was dye his hair white. And I don't know what he looked like, but it wasn't a particularly good look. He identified it wasn't a particularly good look, and then struggled to get rid of it, get the dye out of his hair. But, that was just one thing that came about. But individuality. Now, I say it's sensitive. It is. When I've done this with sort of LGBT young people, this can be really, really difficult to the point where it can be fatal, where young people actually take their own lives because it's been too difficult to come out or talk to their parents. So that's another reality. This stage, for some young people, won't survive it. So again, we have to approach this in a different way and reflect on ourselves and how do we support that young person so they can develop effectively. If we can do that, then we will develop maturity. So we go through the attachment phase where we are the controllers. So we're telling them what to do and guiding them. And then as the detachment phase come in, and again, this is not something that's obvious. So it's not like at 12 they go through the attachment phase. This is something where your relationship becomes important, comes into its own. You identify suddenly that young person's wanting responsibility. So at this stage, they may be going through that detachment phase. They've now on that next development stage, whereas the older child hasn't reached that yet. Now, arguably, sometimes they may need a nudge, but we can't just assume that because of the older child, they should be developing faster, or they should be the next person to move into that detachment phase. It doesn't work like that. The other thing is that at the attachment phase, as I said, we become the controller. So we're telling them what to do, keep them safe and keep them secure. But as they go into the detachment phase, we have to take a step back and become the consultant. All right. We still want to keep them safe and secure, but we have to just ease it out a bit and give them a little bit of freedom to explore their own identity and their own independence, but in a safe way, in a managed way. How do we do that? And I get a lot of times when I talk to parents, when parents come up to me and say, as soon as they turn 13, I don't know what happened. Okay. Suddenly, they're a different person, and it's really difficult. The family hasn't changed. We're still a loving family. We're still a supportive family, but we don't know. They don't want to be part of it. So I reflect that on them and say, well, the reality is something has changed in your family. That young person has changed. And because of that change, the family has to change to accommodate that. So if you think about it in terms of when we talk about systemic practice or therapeutic practice, we look at families as a unit. And if something in that unit changes, then the unit has to accommodate that to maintain that family unit. A good analogy is that if you have a flower that's dying in a pot, we don't chuck out the flower. We try to nurture the environment to make it grow. That's exactly the same when we talk about nurturing nature and that development. So we have to take a step back and think, right, okay, so we're going to have to accommodate this young person because they're going through a developmental stage. How do we do that effectively without breaking the family apart or the relationship apart or falling out to the point where it becomes destructive? How do we do that? And it is, again, all down to communication. And again, the other example I'll give is I get a lot of parents as well coming up and saying, I don't like who they're mucking about with. And my first question is, who are they mucking about with? And they'll come back and say, well, just young people from the estate or from the street. And I'm saying, yeah, but who are they? I don't know. They're just young people, and I think they're a bad influence. Well, you don't know that until you understand who they're mucking about with. Who are their friends? Because if you make an arbitrary decision about, right, I don't like who you're mucking about with, you're staying in, you're grounded, then what you may be doing is cutting off important relationships within that group. So the young person's best friends may be in this young group of young people, and they go along to this group because their best friends are there. So one or two out of maybe a crowd of 10 or 15 or something. So they're going there to continue that relationship with the young person, with their best friends. That's why they're best friends. And if you make an arbitrary decision and cut that off, then it makes it very difficult for them to nurture that relationship. And that relationship, if nurtured, becomes meaningful. And then it becomes a support for that young person because it's going to be tough. So next time we have these thoughts and you are concerned, explore it with your young person. Sit down and talk to them, And it's not about saying, right, I want to know who you're mucking about with. It's about help me understand the relationships you're having in relation to this group of young people. Are your best friends in it? Do you go along and chat with your best friends? Who are your best friends? What's so special about the group? What do you like about the group? Talk to them, explore that with them. Don't lay down the rules. They don't want rules, right? They're in that adult phase, that perception. So talk to them like young adults and give them choices, and tell them choices have consequences. You make good choices, you have bad choices. And if you make a bad choice, then there are consequences to that. If you make good choices, then they're positive, healthy consequences. So again, it's something they can actually think about, informed choices. They can make decisions for themselves. And these are some big decisions, as it were. These are adult decisions. Okay, so we've come to this stage, and what else has changed then? Well, we live in a different society. The participants say, we are 20th century beings in a 21st century world. Let's not drag our young people back into the 20th century. Let's move into the 21st century. That's a reality, okay? That happens every generation. We have to be aware of that, and we have to understand that and reflect on that. That's us, not the young person. That's us. We need to reflect on that and learn from it. The other big thing is technology. Now, pre-COVID, a lot of issues were around young people and their phones, okay, that technology. COVID came in and suddenly we relied on technology to communicate. So post-COVID, some of those concerns have been minimized, but it's still there, okay? But the reality is, this is the first generation that's born in with technology. And it isn't until this generation passes that we will know how technology has affected human development. But we are learning on the curve. We are all learning on the curve. And you can see that through social media. We're patching up things, repairing things, putting things in place to try and make them safe. but it is a learning curve, and we're all on it. The only reality is that it's here to stay. Okay? So we have to try and embrace it rather than fight it. So how do we do that effectively and safely? So we need to understand it better. So we need to learn from our young people. They're the ones that are just absorbing this and understand it better than we are. And we have to accept that, they are teaching us. They are taking on that role. And we now know from research and studies is that whatever a young person goes through in real life, they now go through in a virtual life as well. So they operate in a virtual world and they operate in a real world. So everything that happens in the real world happens in the virtual world as well, but with different impacts, okay? In the virtual world, it's literally immediate and global, so can be more destructive on you. Okay, so we're now starting to realize some of the complexities of growing up in the new world, in this modern world. And then we had the pandemic. And post-pandemic, we now know that the impact has been significant on mental health. And a lot of people are struggling with that. The impact on the developmental stages has been detrimental in some cases, where some young people didn't manage to gain those social skills because they weren't allowed out. They weren't allowed to go out and socialize in the real world. So young people nowadays are going through this post-pandemic impact as well, as we all are. And some people are really struggling. And that includes things like education. And we're all trying to do our best to manage that and support that. And we play a part in that as well, okay? So working with these agencies and these bureaucracies to help support young people. Okay, you may be thinking, well, what happened to the parents and the carers in this grown-up stage? Well, the reality is that we are the constant, reliable support network. So all these meaningful relationships, whether with their peers, with their parents, with their relatives, with their professionals, with educators, all those meaningful relationships that have been developed and nurtured, they become their pillars of support. That's why it's so important to develop these relationships at this early stage. So what happens is young people go into this chaotic world of growth with the complexities, internal and external. And then when they're exhausted, they come back into this constant, reliable support network. They recharge and then they go back into this world of growing up. So what they've identified is the parents and carers are still very important to them, but as a support network. So you can imagine then, if you are in conflict with your young person as a parent or carer, then that is one of their support pillars. So you take that out because of that conflict situation, then it becomes really difficult for that young person to manage. Or if their needs are not being met in an appropriate way, then young people will go somewhere else to satisfy those needs. So the idea is that how do we manage this? And we learn from experience, okay? Through our own upbringing, through our own learning, through our observations, through things like this. I feel myself in a very privileged position in that we're providing, or I'm providing, information about life skills. Because life skills are normally learnt through life experience. And as I said before, if you don't have, or you have difficult life experiences, then those life skills themselves can be inappropriate. There could be gaps, there could be shortfalls. So I'm in a really privileged position by providing you with information, you and others and young people, with information that you can pass down and practice to young people. Now, again, because of this work, I look back and think, well, if I'd known this 30 years ago, I would have been a better parent. And the reality is there are no parenting books as such, okay? There's no one parenting book. There's lots of parenting books, okay? But we only parent what we know. And if we don't know a lot, then we parent to the best of our ability. And all parents will be parenting to the best of their ability. All, main caregivers will be doing that. And one of the reasons I suppose you've come on this training is to improve that, to get this information. Okay, so this is the main part of the presentation, okay? So what I'm going to do now in terms of finishing that, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I need to highlight in this. But the reality is that for me, this is a very simple graph that can show you developmental stages, and you can identify at what stage your young person is in and how we're supporting that stage. And can we take a step back and think about, could we do this another way? Could we maybe improve on this? Could we enhance on this? Do I need some help in this? Remember, the most powerful people in the world ask for help on a daily basis. Asking for help is not a weakness. If anything, it's a strength and can make your relationship stronger. So again, in summary, we've sort of been able to explore the developmental stages of young people, the stage to adulthood. Hopefully, we've helped you reflect and consider how you're currently managing these stages and to think about how you could respond and support young people with this better understanding of their developmental needs, okay? And as I said before, the last part of the brain is this emotional communication. And sometimes as parents and carers, we trigger the conflict because we haven't understood the dynamic of that young person's behaviour. So it may be a case that a young person had a hard time at school, really stressed out, wasn't able to express himself at school, so they're still stressed and still a bit angry, and they come home to this safe environment, all right, to wind down, and you maybe very innocently say, how'd you get on at school? All this pent-up emotion is there, and they want to release it. And the opportunity now has been overtaken by that simple question. So they may turn around and say, well, what do you care? You never asked me these things, blah, blah, I'm going up to my room, and storm off. And you suddenly look and say, don't you shout at me. Bang, we're in a conflict. The young person wanted to offload their stress, didn't know how to articulate their emotion, and it just came out as bleh. We've misread that, and then we've sort of triggered a conflict scenario. But you need to determine that through your relationship. Are they being defiant, or have they had a hard day at school? Are they stressed? Arguably, you might go up 15 minutes later to the room and say, right, how are you feeling now? You might go, right, sorry I shouted at you. I was stressed out. Arguably, nobody wants to get into a conflict. They'd rather have a happy, peaceful life. So how do we facilitate that? Some take-home messages. Growing up is a life experience that we all go through. But again, some of those experiences we have are good or bad, but they shape everything that we do in terms of our developmental process, our brain process, and how we grow. So again, keeping those experiences as positive and healthy as you can, and those messages as well. And again, we had developing our resources, we had neuroscientists talk about when they did a sort of presentation to young people at our conference. And they were saying, right, young people, go out and experience stuff, do exciting stuff, do good stuff, enjoy yourself. And I thought, what a great message, because a lot of the time we're telling young people not to do stuff, okay? Whereas in reality, we should be telling them to do stuff, good stuff, safe stuff, exciting stuff, fun stuff. So the brain is getting all that information, that developmental stuff. And again, remember, it's in your best interest for your child to work with you rather than against you. Okay, that doesn't mean to say that you have to acquiesce or be avoidant. You still have a parental responsibility. You still have parental authority. Okay, but again, it's about how you use that authority and how you recognize that responsibility and accountability. Remember, if a child says no to you, where's your authority going? What do you do? And it's similar, if you give an ultimatum, then you don't leave any room for negotiation. You don't leave any room. The ultimatum, then you either have to enact or you don't. And if you don't, then arguably you become ineffective. So be careful when you're issuing ultimatums, okay? Because it's something that you might not have wanted to do, okay? You wanted other options, but you suddenly said, right, if you do that, you're grounded for a week. And then suddenly they do it and you think, well, if I'm grounded for a week, it's going to be a difficult week. Okay, so just think about how we respond to these things. So what you need to do is you need to understand your relationship with your child. You need to communicate with them. Nothing works without a relationship. And communication is how you start, maintain, and build relationships. And remember, if you value the relationship, it's not about being right and it's not about being winning. It's about maintaining that relationship. Communication is key. Okay. You can follow us on all social media platforms. So keep in touch with us. And again, explore our website. The website's there for you. And we have resources on there to help you as a parent. And they're all free. Okay.